Pennsylvania is a great place to live if you're a law-abiding gun owner, and that's because we have some really great self-defense laws. And beyond just normal self-defense that is just common and ancient to mankind, we have two very specific types of law that you should be aware of. One is stand your ground, and the other one is the Castle Doctrine. Let's talk first a little bit about what makes them different and then what similarities they have. With the Castle Doctrine, it comes from the ancient idea that a man's home or a woman's home is their castle, meaning that if someone comes in and they're not permitted to do so, that could be a very bad day for them. You have the right to defend yourself and your family inside your home. Now, where Pennsylvania departs from a lot of other states is that our Castle Doctrine even extends beyond the actual archway of the house or the entryway of the house. It applies to dwellings and residences. It includes hotel rooms that you're temporarily staying a part of, a car provided that you're in it. It even includes patios and places that you're visiting as a guest where you're invited to be. And it also includes work provided that it's not against a coworker. You can't use the Castle Doctrine against a coworker. You have no duty to retreat if you're in one of those selected areas. So in other words, you can defend yourself even if you could retreat, but you're allowed to defend yourself. Now, it can't apply to people that you might be considered to have some sort of custody dispute with or over the custody of a child, as we'll talk about a little bit later on, or cohabitants. For example, you couldn't claim the Castle Doctrine against your wife. But you can use it against certainly strangers as long as we're in one of those core places. Now, the key parts of it in the scenarios that it provides for is if the person, the bad guy, is in the process of unlawfully and forcefully entering one of those protected areas. If they have entered into one of those protected areas, or number three, is attempting to unlawfully and forcefully enter with the intent to remove you or someone else unlawfully. That's where in the Castle Doctrine we get the presumption of reasonableness, meaning that you're presumed to have acted reasonably in your deadly use of force if you're in one of those protected areas and if one of those three conditions that we just talked about are in place. It's very powerful, a presumption of reasonableness. Now we take a look at stand your ground law. Stand your ground law is going to apply in Pennsylvania in three specific types of situations. First one has to do with, are you in a place where you're lawfully allowed to be? So in other words, you can't be trespassing on someone else's land and sit there and say that you want to use stand your ground. Number two is that you have to come to this type of situation and you have to act reasonable under the circumstances. And what's reasonable under the circumstances as far as your fear and your justification of deadly use of force? Well, it's those old friends that we use in normal use of deadly force. And that would be kidnapping, sexual assault, or serious bodily injury or death. If one of those are present and it's reasonable in the circumstances, then stand your ground, you're in good shape. And then number three, and most importantly for stand your ground, is if the assailant, meaning the bad person, uses or displays or intimates or otherwise makes it known or perceived or reasonably thought of having some sort of deadly instrument. What does that mean? A deadly instrument can obviously be a gun, obviously be a knife, but it can also be other types of things that can inflict deadly force, such as an axe handle, or it can be a truncheon, or even just something like a blunt object that can be used, and if it hits you, it could cause deadly force. So the bottom line of it is stand your ground applies in Pennsylvania, provided that you're in a lawful place and that you're acting reasonable of one of those four areas of fear, and that the assailant or the bad guy is displaying or using or reasonably perceived to be displaying or using a deadly weapon. Castle Doctrine applies not only to your home, but a lot of other places include like a patio, a deck, places where you're overnight guest and you're invited to be, even at work, but not against coworkers, not in custody disputes. And it has to do with people who are forcefully and unlawfully entering, or if they have in fact entered, or are trying to attempt to enter, or did in fact attempt to enter in order to grab someone out, such as you or someone else that's there. And it makes for a presumption of reasonableness.